"That's forbidden," the nun whispered. The mountain man understood, and it shook the whole town. The town was small, quiet, and tucked away at the edge of the mountains. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, birthdays, and even small secrets. Birds chirped in the mornings, and the streets were empty, except for the sound of children playing or the soft creak of doors opening in the early hours. Life was predictable here, slow and simple, and people liked it that way. But that peace was about to be disrupted in a way no one expected. One crisp autumn morning, a stranger appeared at the edge of town. He walked slowly, carefully, carrying nothing but a worn leather bag slung across his shoulder. His clothes were rugged, patched in places, and his boots looked heavy from long travels. The man had a kind of quiet strength that made people notice him without meaning to. Even the wind seemed to pause when he moved, rustling the golden leaves around him in a way that felt deliberate, almost like it was warning the town that something had changed. The stranger didn't go straight into the town center. Instead, he lingered at the outskirts, where the forest met the last row of houses. Children peeking from behind fences whispered to each other about the mountain man who had come down from the hills. Another shook her head. Another shook her head. "No, he doesn't. He looks sad." The children weren't sure what to make of him, and adults, seeing the children's curiosity, began to glance cautiously at the stranger too. At the heart of the town stood the monastery, a tall, quiet building with stone walls that had grown soft with age. Its bells rang softly at dawn and at dusk, and the people of the town had always found comfort in them. Inside the monastery lived Sister Mary, a nun known for her kindness and her deep understanding of people. She had spent many years helping the townspeople, listening to their problems, and giving advice that always seemed to be exactly what they needed. Her presence was calm, steady, and reassuring, like a safe harbor in a storm. It was Sister Mary who first noticed the stranger wandering near the monastery. He didn't enter the grounds, but he walked along the edges of the property, glancing at the building with eyes that seemed both curious and haunted. There was something in the way he looked at the monastery that made her uneasy, a feeling she could not explain. She watched him for a long moment, unsure whether to approach him or keep her distance. Finally, curiosity overcame caution. Sister Mary stepped outside, her simple black habit swaying gently in the breeze. The stranger turned when he heard her footsteps, his dark eyes meeting hers. There was a flicker of recognition in his gaze, though neither of them spoke. The wind carried their silence across the empty street, and for a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. "You shouldn't be here," Sister Mary said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Not because he was dangerous. She had learned that not all strangers brought harm, but because she sensed there were things about him she was not ready to understand. "This place, it is not for wandering strangers." The man nodded slowly, almost respectfully. He did not speak, but there was an understanding in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of something unspoken. It was as if they shared a secret that neither had yet voiced. The children peering from behind fences held their breath, sensing something unusual was unfolding, though they did not know what it was. Over the next few days, the mountain man remained on the edge of town. He explored slowly, never rushing, observing the streets, the houses, and the small shops. He greeted no one, and no one dared to greet him. His silence made people nervous, but it also made them curious. Rumors began to spread. "Where did he come from?" people whispered. "Why does he look so different?" Some said he was a hermit, living in the mountains for years, while others thought he might be searching for someone or something he had lost long ago. Sister Mary continued to watch him from a distance. She noticed small things, how he paused in front of certain houses, how he studied the carvings on the monastery doors, how he sometimes stared at the ground as if remembering something painful. She felt a mix of fear and compassion. There was a story there, she knew, one that could shake the very heart of the town if it was ever told. But she also sensed that the man needed help, and perhaps, in his own way, he was trying to help the town too. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the town in shades of orange and gold, the mountain man came closer to the monastery. Sister Mary was tending the small garden near the entrance when he stopped a few steps away. She felt her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from anticipation, as if this meeting was destined to happen. "You shouldn't touch the past," she whispered, almost to herself. The words came without thinking, a warning she did not yet understand. The man's eyes softened, and he nodded once, a slow, deliberate gesture that carried understanding. He did not speak, but in that moment, Sister Mary felt that he knew exactly what she meant. There was a bond forming between them, fragile and silent, built on the unspoken knowledge that both of them carried heavy memories, and both were connected to a history the town had long tried to forget. As evening fell, the streets grew quieter, the children returned home, and the adults closed their shops, locking doors and windows. The mountain man disappeared into the shadows, heading back toward the mountains, leaving only the faintest traces of his presence. Sister Mary watched until he was gone, a strange mixture of relief and worry settling in her chest. The town slept that night, unaware that its life had quietly changed. The arrival of the mountain man had awakened something old, something long buried beneath the surface of their daily routines. And Sister Mary, standing by the monastery gates, knew that the days ahead would test the town in ways no one could imagine. Somewhere deep in the forest, the mountain man looked back at the town one last time before disappearing into the trees. There was a purpose in his journey, and it was only a matter of time before the town would feel the weight of his presence. The mountains held his secrets, but the town, with its narrow streets and quiet whispers, was about to discover that some truths cannot stay hidden forever. And so the stage was set. The mountain man had arrived, the nun had sensed the danger, and the town, in its peaceful ignorance, was about to face a story it could never forget. The silence of the mountains and the quiet whispers of the monastery marked the beginning of a tale that would shake the hearts of everyone in the town, a story of secrets, courage, and understanding that would leave its mark for generations. The mountain man did not return to the town immediately. For days he remained hidden in the forest, moving slowly among the trees, listening to the wind and observing the town from a distance. He watched the small routines of the people below, the baker opening his shop, the children running along the narrow streets, the townsfolk greeting one another with smiles and polite nods. Everything seemed peaceful on the surface, but he could sense an undercurrent of unease. Something had been buried in the town, a secret hidden for generations, and he had come to uncover it. Meanwhile, Sister Mary could not stop thinking about him. Every morning she would glance toward the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of him on the hillsides. She wondered what had brought him to their town, and why he had chosen this quiet, isolated place. There was something about the way he moved, something almost reverent, that told her he was not simply a traveler seeking shelter. He was searching for something, though what it was, she could not yet guess. One afternoon, curiosity got the better of her. She took a small basket of bread and cheese and walked toward the edge of the forest. The wind rustled the golden leaves as she stepped onto the soft earth, careful not to make too much noise. She found him sitting near a stream, his dark eyes watching the water as if it were speaking to him. The sunlight fell on his face, revealing lines that told of hardship, years spent in the wild, and long, lonely nights. You shouldn't wander alone, Sister Mary said softly, stepping closer. Her voice did not startle him. He turned slowly, a faint smile appearing on his face, and gestured for her to sit on a nearby rock. There was a quiet respect in his actions, a wordless invitation to share the space between them without fear. I watch the town from here, he said finally, his voice calm but deep. It is peaceful, but it hides things. Things people do not speak of, things they try to forget. Sister Mary nodded, understanding immediately. She had long suspected that the town carried shadows in its past. There had been whispers over the years, strange events, old disputes, unexplained disappearances, and stories about the monastery that people had avoided discussing, but she had never found the courage to investigate, fearing the pain it might uncover. Yet here was this stranger, silent and patient, and somehow she felt he could see what others could not. "What are you looking for?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He did not answer at once. Instead, he stared at the flowing water, as though listening to the secrets it carried. "I am looking for truth," he said finally. "The town has hidden it for too long. I cannot rest until it is found." Sister Mary felt a chill run down her spine. His words were simple, but they carried weight. She realized that he was not just a visitor. He was a catalyst, someone who would stir the town's hidden memories, whether they were ready or not. She thought of the people she had known all her life, their kindness, their small daily joys, and their quiet fears, and wondered how they would react if the past they had tried to forget came to light. Days passed, and the mountain man's presence became more visible. He walked into the town in the early mornings, carrying supplies, observing buildings, and sometimes stopping to talk to the elders. The townspeople were wary. Few dared approach him, and even those who did found their words stumbling. There was a calm wisdom in him that demanded respect, but also a strange sadness that unsettled them. Rumors began to spread once again, louder this time. "He knows something," people whispered. Something about the monastery or the old town. Sister Mary watched him navigate the streets, feeling both concern and admiration. She noticed the way he looked at the monastery doors, the way he traced his fingers along the old carvings, as if trying to read messages left decades ago. One evening, she approached him quietly as he crouched near the steps of the building. "You are touching what you should not," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Some things are forbidden for a reason." He looked at her, his eyes steady. "I understand," he replied softly. "But some truths cannot remain hidden. They do not belong to one person or one generation. They belong to everyone." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the wind moving the leaves around them. Sister Mary realized that his purpose was noble, even if it might disrupt the lives of those she had cared for all her life. She also realized that she could no longer ignore the truth herself. Something deep inside told her that the town's past was about to resurface, and she had to be part of it. Over the next week, the mountain man began visiting the town more openly. He spent time in the archives of the monastery, carefully examining old letters, journals, and ledgers. He spoke little, but his presence was enough to stir curiosity among the townspeople. Some elders were hesitant, worried about old wounds reopening. Others were fascinated, eager to hear stories they had only heard in fragments or whispers. One afternoon he approached Sister Mary with a stack of old papers. "These were hidden long ago," he said quietly. "Some people feared they would bring shame or pain, but hiding them has not helped. It has only made the truth harder to find." Sister Mary took the papers in her hands, her fingers trembling. She felt the weight of history in the faded ink, the fragile paper, and the secrets written so long ago. She realized that this mountain man, this quiet stranger, was not just an intruder. He was a guide, someone who had come to help the town face its past, and perhaps heal from it. The town itself began to feel the change, though few understood why. There was a tension in the air, subtle but noticeable. Conversations in the streets grew quieter, more cautious. People glanced at the monastery and then at the mountain man, wondering what he had discovered and how it might affect their lives. The children, too, sensed something was different. They watched him from afar, fascinated and slightly fearful, as if he carried a story too big for them to fully understand. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Sister Mary and the mountain man walked together along the river that ran through the town. The water glistened with golden reflections, and the air smelled of autumn leaves and earth. "You have changed the town," she said softly. Even without speaking, they feel it. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the flowing water. "Change is never easy," he replied. "But it is necessary. The town cannot stay in the dark forever. Some truths must be seen, even if they are difficult." Sister Mary felt a mixture of hope and fear. She knew he was right. The town had hidden its secrets for too long, and now they were about to be revealed. She also knew that once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same again. As darkness fell, the mountain man disappeared into the forest once more. Sister Mary returned to the monastery, carrying the old papers and a heavy sense of anticipation. She realized that she had become part of something bigger than herself, a story that would challenge the town, uncover its hidden past, and perhaps teach its people to face the truth with courage and understanding. And so, the mountain man's search continued, and Sister Mary's role became clearer. Together, though unspoken, they were preparing the town for a revelation that would shake its foundations and leave a mark on every heart. The quiet streets, the gentle river, and the old monastery would never be the same again. The days grew colder as autumn deepened, and the town began to feel the subtle weight of change. People went about their daily routines, but there was a tension in the air that no one could ignore. Conversations were quieter, and strangers passing through the streets would sometimes notice the unease, though they could not understand its cause. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something it did not yet know. The mountain man continued to move through the town carefully, always watching, listening, and observing. He never spoke unnecessarily, and his quiet presence seemed to make people pause. Some felt curious about him, some wary, and others uneasy, sensing that his arrival was tied to events long buried in the town's history. He carried a notebook, filling it with observations, sketches of buildings and notes on the streets, as though he was mapping not only the town, but the invisible stories it held. Sister Mary observed him from the monastery, feeling a mixture of admiration and worry. She understood his purpose better now. He was not here to harm the town, but to uncover its hidden truths. And yet she knew that once these truths were revealed, the town could not remain the same. She tried to prepare herself for what was coming, but even she felt uncertain about the depth of the secrets he would bring to light. Rumors began to spread among the townspeople, fueled by curiosity and fear. A few of the elders whispered to one another about the stranger who had come from the mountains. "He is not ordinary," one said. "I think he knows something about the monastery, about the past." Others shook their heads. "He is just a wanderer," they said. "Let him be. We have enough troubles of our own." Yet, even as they tried to dismiss him, their eyes would follow him on the streets, noting the way he studied the town, the careful way he examined buildings, and the quiet, deliberate gestures of a man searching for answers. One afternoon, the mountain man walked toward the oldest part of town, where the streets were narrow and the houses leaned slightly, as if carrying the weight of many years. He paused in front of a small, abandoned building with boarded-up windows. Its walls were covered in faded paint and ivy, and a chill seemed to rise from it. He knelt to examine the door, brushing away dust and leaves, and made notes in his notebook. Sister Mary arrived quietly behind him, her steps gentle on the stone path. "This building," she said softly, "was once part of the monastery's old property. People have avoided it for decades." He glanced at her, and she could see the seriousness in his eyes. "Some places keep secrets," he said, "even when no one remembers why. I think this is one of them." The nun felt a shiver run down her spine. She had long known that the town had stories it preferred to forget, but she had never thought they would be uncovered in this way. She wondered what he might find inside that abandoned building, what truths lay hidden under years of dust, and how the townspeople would react if these secrets came to light. Over the next few days, the mountain man's presence became impossible to ignore. He visited the town in the mornings, moving from street to street, quietly asking questions and observing reactions. Children watched him from windows, fascinated by his calm, mysterious demeanor. Adults whispered in doorways, discussing his actions and speculating about his purpose. Some were worried, fearing that his discoveries might bring shame or reopen old wounds. Others were intrigued, curious to know what someone could find that the town had tried so hard to forget. Sister Mary found herself drawn into his work more than ever. She began helping him, guiding him to places and people that might have answers. Together they uncovered small fragments of the past, letters from decades ago, journals hidden in drawers, and old photographs tucked away in boxes. Each discovery was small on its own, but together they painted a picture of events that had shaped the town in ways people no longer remembered. One evening, the mountain man and Sister Mary sat in the quiet monastery library, examining a stack of letters. The sun had set, and the room was bathed in soft candlelight. He picked up a letter carefully, reading it aloud in a low voice. The words revealed a story of fear, loyalty, and choices made in secret, decisions that had affected generations without the town fully realizing it. Sister Mary listened silently, feeling both sadness and determination. She realized that the town's past was not simple, that it was filled with human struggles and emotions, and that the mountain man had come to help the people understand and heal from these stories. Meanwhile, outside the monastery, the town's curiosity and unease were growing. People began to notice changes, the way the mountain man lingered near the archives, the way Sister Mary sometimes disappeared with him for hours, and the small signs that something important was happening. Conversations at the market grew hushed. "Have you seen him today?" people asked each other. "I think he has found something," others replied with a shake of the head. "Let him be," they said, though their eyes betrayed a mixture of fear and curiosity. Tension began to mount as the mountain man discovered more hidden truths. He found letters and journals that spoke of promises broken, of events forgotten, and of rules that had been ignored in the past. The words were simple, but the meaning behind them carried weight. Sister Mary helped him interpret them, explaining the context and the people involved. Together, they began to piece together a story that had been buried for decades. One day, as they examined an old ledger from the monastery, Sister Mary noticed something unusual. Certain entries were crossed out, erased, or written over.
"These were hidden on purpose," she whispered. "Someone did not want the truth to be known."
"Truth often frightens people," he said quietly, "but hiding it does not make it disappear. It only grows heavier with time." Their work began to have a visible effect on the town. People noticed the mountain man more often, watched him carefully, and whispered in small groups about what he might uncover next. The children, who had once only peeked at him from windows, now followed him from a distance. Even the adults, though cautious, could not help but wonder what secrets the man and the nun were uncovering. Sister Mary began to feel the strain of her role. She had spent her life providing comfort and guidance to the townspeople, and now she was helping reveal truths that could disturb them. She worried about the consequences, about how the town would react when the full story was revealed, and about whether people would be ready to face what had been hidden for so long. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the town in shades of gold and red, the mountain man walked with Sister Mary through the streets. He had discovered something significant, a document that tied the town's history to events long forgotten, events that had shaped the present in ways people did not realize. "You understand now," he said softly, looking at her. "The town is not ready for everything yet, but it must prepare. Change will come, and it will not be gentle." Sister Mary nodded, her heart heavy but determined. She knew he was right. The town had lived in quiet ignorance for decades, but the truth could no longer stay hidden. They were standing at the edge of something powerful, something that would test the courage and understanding of every person in the town. And so the mountain man continued his careful work, and Sister Mary continued to guide him. Together they moved closer to uncovering the secrets that had been buried for generations. The town, though still unaware of the full extent of what was coming, began to feel the tension, the unease, and the quiet anticipation of change. The streets were quieter at night, and the townspeople went to bed with a sense of expectation they could not explain. Somewhere deep in the monastery archives, letters and journals waited to tell their stories, and in the mountains, the man who had come from afar continued to watch, wait, and prepare for the moment when the town would finally face the truth. The mountain man's presence had begun to stir the town, slowly but surely. Rumors grew, whispers spread, and curiosity deepened. Change was coming, and with it, the uncovering of secrets that had long been hidden. Sister Mary knew that the coming days would test them all, but she also knew that with patience, understanding, and courage, the town could face what had been kept in the shadows for so long. The crisp autumn mornings gave way to chilly afternoons, and the town began to sense that something extraordinary was unfolding. People went about their daily routines, but an unspoken tension lingered like fog over the streets. Windows that were usually left open now remained shut. Doors were closed a little more tightly, and conversations were filled with pauses as neighbors glanced nervously toward the monastery or the edge of the forest. The mountain man had become a familiar figure in the town, though few knew him well. His silent observation had shifted to careful investigation, and his presence carried a quiet authority. Children watched him with a mixture of awe and fear, while adults whispered among themselves, trying to guess the nature of his purpose. The mountain man had begun uncovering small fragments of the town's hidden history, old letters, journals, and ledgers that had been tucked away for decades. One afternoon, Sister Mary found him kneeling on the floor of the monastery's dusty archives, a stack of old papers spread before him. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the faded ink on the fragile pages. "I think we have found something," he said quietly, his eyes shining with a mix of excitement and gravity. Sister Mary leaned over to look at the documents. The papers contained detailed accounts of decisions made long ago, rules that had been broken, promises that had been forgotten, and events that had been intentionally hidden. These records told a story of the town's past that was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. She could feel the weight of the history pressing down on her, and she knew the mountain man was right. The town could not ignore these truths any longer. They began to piece the story together. It was not a story of malice or wrongdoing, but one of human error, fear, and secrecy. Certain families had kept their experiences private, hoping to protect future generations from shame or conflict. Some events had been misunderstood, while others had been exaggerated into legends that frightened children and silenced adults. The mountain man and Sister Mary realized that uncovering these truths would shake the town's foundation, but it could also heal old wounds. The first revelation came in the form of a letter from a former town elder written decades earlier. The letter described a conflict that had divided the community in silence. It spoke of misunderstandings between families, promises that had been broken, and actions taken out of fear rather than malice. Sister Mary read the letter aloud to the mountain man, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "This explains so much," she said softly. "The fear, the silence, the way people avoid certain topics. It all makes sense now." "It is a story that needed to be told," he replied. "Hiding it has only caused more confusion and pain. Now we can begin to show the town the truth." Word of the mountain man's discoveries began to ripple through the town, though not everyone knew the details. Some noticed him speaking quietly with Sister Mary, gesturing toward the archives or the monastery grounds. Others saw him carrying old papers and documents through the streets, always careful to handle them with respect. Rumors grew, fueled by curiosity and fear. "He has found something about the past," people whispered, "something the town has tried to forget." The mountain man and Sister Mary decided to share the first pieces of the story carefully, knowing that too much at once could overwhelm the townspeople. They chose a small gathering of elders, people who had lived in the town for decades and who had the wisdom to understand the context of the discoveries. The elders gathered in the monastery hall, their faces lined with years of experience and a hint of apprehension. Sister Mary began to speak, her voice calm and reassuring. "We have found documents that tell the story of events long hidden," she said. "These are not tales of wrongdoing, but of fear, misunderstanding, and choices made in difficult times. It is time for the town to understand the past, so that we can all move forward with clarity." The elders listened intently as the mountain man laid out the letters, journals, and records. He explained the events carefully, piece by piece, connecting the dots that had remained hidden for generations. The elders were surprised at first, their expressions reflecting shock, concern, and even relief. Some memories were painful, others were misunderstood, and many were simply forgotten over time. But as the story unfolded, they began to see the truth clearly for the first time. One elder, a man with a weathered face and eyes full of memory, spoke up. "I never knew it was like this," he said, his voice trembling. "We all thought we were protecting the town, but perhaps we only made the fear stronger. Perhaps it was time to speak." "Speaking is the first step," he said. "Understanding comes next, and healing comes after that." As the elders processed the information, Sister Mary and the mountain man realized that the story had a greater reach than they had expected. The town's younger generation, who had grown up hearing only fragments of the past, would also need to learn the truth. They began planning how to share the story more broadly, carefully choosing the right words and the right moments to avoid panic or misunderstanding. The first public revelation came at the town's weekly gathering in the main square. The mountain man and Sister Mary stood before the townspeople holding some of the documents in their hands. A hush fell over the crowd, and even the children sensed the importance of the moment. Sister Mary spoke first, her voice steady but gentle. "We have discovered pieces of our town's history that have been hidden for many years. These stories are not meant to punish or shame anyone. They are meant to help us understand, learn, and grow." The mountain man continued, explaining the events in simple terms. He told the story of the conflicts, the misunderstandings, and the choices made out of fear. He spoke of courage, honesty, and the importance of facing the past. The townspeople listened quietly, some nodding, some wiping away tears, and others staring in silent contemplation. As the story unfolded, a remarkable change began to take place. The townspeople started talking to one another, sharing their memories, and asking questions they had never dared to ask before. The fear that had long held the town in its grip began to fade, replaced by a cautious hope. People realized that the past, though imperfect, had lessons to offer, and that the truth once hidden could lead to understanding and unity. Sister Mary watched the town transform before her eyes. She saw neighbors embracing, children asking questions, and elders explaining their experiences with honesty and courage. She knew that the mountain man's arrival had been a catalyst, someone who had helped them see the value of truth and the power of understanding. Even the mountain man seemed affected by the change. He had come with a mission, a purpose, and now he saw the fruits of his careful work. The town was beginning to heal, and the bonds between people were growing stronger. The fear and secrecy that had once dominated daily life were giving way to openness and trust. As evening fell, the town square emptied, and the mountains cast long shadows over the streets. Sister Mary and the mountain man walked quietly through the town, observing the calm that had returned. Though the journey was far from over, the first step had been taken. The town had faced part of its past, and with understanding and courage, it could continue to uncover the remaining truths. The mountain man paused at the edge of the forest, looking back at the town one last time that evening. He had brought change, but he knew the work was not finished. Sister Mary joined him, standing silently beside him, sharing the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the town was beginning to see clearly for the first time in generations. And so the town slept that night with a new sense of hope. The streets were quiet, but the hearts of the townspeople were lighter. The mountain man and Sister Mary had started a journey that would continue, uncovering the remaining secrets of the past, healing old wounds, and building a future based on understanding and trust. The story that had been hidden for so long was finally beginning to be told. The mountain air had grown colder, and the first signs of winter were beginning to appear. Frost shimmered on the leaves, and the mornings were quiet, with a stillness that felt different from the usual calm. The town, once wrapped in secrets and whispers, was now alive with conversation. People were talking openly about events that had long been buried, sharing stories they had never dared to mention before. There was still hesitation, but there was also a sense of relief and curiosity. The mountain man walked through the town streets with a quiet purpose. He had returned from the forest early that morning, carrying a bundle of old papers and letters he had discovered in a remote cabin far in the hills. These documents contained details that even the monastery's archives had missed, names, dates, and events that had shaped the town's past. He was careful with them, handling each sheet as if it were fragile glass, because he knew the information was powerful and delicate. Sister Mary joined him, carrying her own stack of documents. Together, they walked toward the monastery, where the townspeople were beginning to gather. The mountain man and the nun had decided that the time had come to share the final pieces of the story. There was no fear in their actions, only quiet determination and respect for the town's readiness. When they arrived, the townspeople were already waiting in the monastery courtyard. There were families from every corner of the town, some holding their children's hands, some standing silently with neighbors, and some elders sitting on benches, their eyes reflecting both curiosity and concern. The air was crisp, and the wind seemed to carry the sense of anticipation along the cobblestone paths. Sister Mary stepped forward first. "Today," she said gently, "we will share more of our town's history. These are stories that have been hidden for many years. Some may surprise you, some may challenge your understanding, but all of them are important. Our goal is not to cause fear or anger, but to help us see the truth, learn from it, and grow together. The mountain man placed the papers on a table carefully. "The truth has weight," he said, his voice calm and steady. "It has the power to frighten, but also the power to heal. We have learned that hiding events only makes their impact stronger. Today we face the past together, and together we will find understanding." As he spoke, he began to recount the events described in the documents. These were stories of human error, of misunderstandings, and of decisions made in fear or confusion. He told of families who had quarreled over small disagreements that escalated because no one had dared to speak openly. He spoke of promises made long ago, some broken, some forgotten, and how those promises had influenced generations. Each story was shared carefully with context and explanation so that people could understand the intentions behind the actions. Townspeople listened quietly. At first, some faces reflected shock or disbelief. There were murmurs among the crowd as people recognized names and places, as they connected the stories to events they had only heard about vaguely. But as the mountain man continued, his calm explanation allowed the townspeople to see the larger picture. They realized that these events were not about wrongdoing, but about humanity, about fear, loyalty, mistakes, and the desire to protect loved ones. Sister Mary stepped forward occasionally, clarifying details and answering questions. She spoke with patience and compassion, reminding the town that understanding the past was the first step toward healing. Children listened intently, their eyes wide as they tried to imagine what life had been like decades ago. Even the elders, some of whom had experienced parts of the stories firsthand, seemed moved by the gentle and truthful way the history was being told. As the afternoon sunlight turned golden and then faded into soft evening light, the final pieces of the story were revealed. The mountain man showed documents that detailed hidden acts of kindness, bravery, and selflessness that had been forgotten over the years. There were letters from people who had quietly helped one another during difficult times, stories of sacrifices made for the good of the community, and accounts of individuals who had taken risks to protect others. These acts, though hidden from history, reminded the townspeople of the goodness that had always existed alongside the challenges. For the first time in generations, the town began to see its history in full. It was not perfect, but it was real. There were mistakes, yes, but there were also lessons. There were moments of fear, but also moments of courage. There were actions taken out of misunderstanding, but there were also gestures of love and care that had been forgotten. When the presentation was over, the townspeople gathered in small groups, talking quietly to one another. There were tears, but also laughter. Some people apologized to others for misunderstandings that had lasted for years. Some embraced neighbors they had once argued with. Children asked questions and adults answered honestly, with the humility that comes from finally facing the truth. Sister Mary watched with satisfaction. She had spent her life helping the town, but this was different. This was more than guidance. She saw bonds being repaired, friendships deepening, and a renewed sense of trust spreading across the community. The mountain man, standing at the edge of the courtyard, looked out at the town he had helped guide through its past. His eyes, usually calm and observant, reflected a quiet pride. He had come to the town as a stranger, but now he had become a part of its history, the catalyst for understanding and change. He knew that he could not stay forever, but he also knew that the town would carry the lessons forward. As night fell, the mountain man prepared to leave. He had completed the task he had come for, the uncovering of the town's secrets and the beginning of its healing. Sister Mary accompanied him to the edge of the forest, the moonlight casting silver shadows on the path.
"You have done more than I imagined," Sister Mary said softly. "The town will never forget what you have brought them."
He nodded, his expression gentle but serious.
"The town has always had the strength," he replied. "I only helped them see it." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the quiet of the night, the rustling of leaves, the distant sound of a dog barking, and the soft murmur of the wind through the trees. The town behind them was sleeping, but its heart was awake, aware, and ready to face the future. Before disappearing into the forest, the mountain man turned back one last time. He saw the warm lights glowing from the windows of the monastery, the peaceful streets, and the people inside, talking quietly and sharing their newfound understanding. A small smile touched his lips. He knew that his journey with this town was ending, but the story he had helped uncover would live on. Sister Mary returned to the monastery, carrying a sense of peace she had never felt before. She had witnessed something remarkable. The town had faced its past, embraced its truths, and begun to heal. She knew that the process of learning and understanding would continue, but the first step had been taken, and it was a step filled with courage, honesty, and hope. Over the following weeks, the town changed in ways that were subtle but powerful. People spoke openly about their families' histories. Long-standing disagreements were resolved through conversation and understanding. Children learned stories that had been hidden from them, and elders shared their memories freely, teaching lessons of empathy and compassion. The mountain man's influence lingered in the town, a reminder that truth, patience, and courage could bring light even to the darkest corners of the past. Though the mountain man had returned to the mountains, his presence remained. The town no longer feared its history, and the lessons of the past became a guiding force for the future. Sister Mary continued her work at the monastery, but now she did so with renewed energy and purpose, knowing that the people she served were learning to face life with honesty and courage. And so, the town slept peacefully each night, its streets quiet, but its hearts awakened. The mountain man's journey had ended, but the story he helped uncover continued to live in every conversation, every act of kindness, and every moment of understanding shared among the townspeople. The town had faced its past and, in doing so, had found a brighter, stronger, and more united future.